Well, hey, Vision. Hey, wasn't that a cool transition video? My goodness, man, we got such a great team that takes our ideas and just flourishes them. So this next series, 8 weeks, I don't want you to miss a week. And if you're out of town or got to work, please catch them online. Watch the message because it's like an 8-piece puzzle that God is going to take to work in your life to help you attain vision more in your life. And I love that word vision. We're going to dig into it today. Before I do, man, I'll tell you about these shirts. And we got a special fall deal on these. $5 for your vision shirt. They're on a table over there. There's only on 50 or 75 of them. So if you want 1 or 2 or 10, get those on your way out. And let me tell you this. Don't use these, just listen, don't use these, honestly, to cut your grass. Wear them around town. You are our walking billboards. When you're standing in line at Walmart and they're looking at your back like, #visionaries, it'll start a conversation. And you tell them about what God's doing in your church, in your life. So please, get your shirts. This series, it's interesting how God, years ago, planted something in me about this term vision. Because about 10 years ago, I was on staff at a church and I was just kind of doing ministry, but I had never preached before. I'd never spoken a message on a Wednesday night, and we did those, or a Sunday. So I asked our pastor, I said, man, can I preach one time? And he was like, sure. And once I got that approval, I was like, oh man, I'm so nervous now. I am so nervous. I remember clearly the day I was preaching on the first Wednesday, and I drove down the parking lot toward the church building, and I was like, why did I do this? Why did I possibly ask to have a chance to preach? And what was so cool, though, is what God put on my heart to share that night about 10 years ago was the topic of vision. And I spoke about finding God's vision for your life. And I had no idea at all back then that God was going to call me to lead a church, and no idea that he was going to call it Vision Church. So it's so cool how God, he sees stuff way out there. So honestly, really, if you feel like you're drifting or on this journey and don't know where it's going, trust that God knows where the journey's going and walk there with him. So as we talk about this concept of vision, and I have been studying this for about 10, 15 years because I love this concept of vision, this thought of visionaries. We're going to unpack that. But when I think about this term vision, the definition that has stood out best to me over the years is this one I'll put on the screen that says that vision it's a mental picture of what could be, and it's fueled. There's some kind of passion in it. It's fueled by a conviction that it should be. So when you think about something in your life that you could look down the road and say, that could be better. That could be different. Something could happen. What's happening in you is that you're getting a mental picture of what could be. But a lot of times in our life, honestly, we get something we imagine or we get something we dream and it fizzles away. I'm telling you, a vision is attached to conviction. Because when you think about what could be and there's a conviction in you that says, wait a second, that should be. That should happen. Change should happen in some way in that area. I want to be a part of that. And little do you know, but that moment you said, I want to be a part of it, you became a visionary. And this term visionary, which we didn't create it here at our church, but we have branded it. And this guy who goes to our church, Big Bill, he's up here sometimes with the announcements. 2 years ago, he wasn't even close to going to church. When we launched January a year ago, he hadn't even thought about church in 7 years. And somebody invited him, and he started coming to the fact that this past spring, he said to me, hey, Matt, there's Americans and there's North Carolinians. He said, man, why don't we go by visionaries? I said, man, that is it. That is who we are. And actually, Bill was traveling today, but we Facebook Live the first service, so he could definitely see this and hear the fact that I'm giving him a little shout out saying, Bill, God spoke through you to help define us in our branding as visionaries. So indeed, this fall series is about vision. It's about being a visionary, one who says, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of making something better and different, whether it's in my life or with an organization, or in our school or in our job. Because when we talk about vision, sometimes it's hard to grasp what that really means. So I want you to kind of see what visionless is like. I mean, have you ever gone into a school or maybe gone into a business and you walk in and you can sense that morale is kind of down? You can sense that there's some backbiting, there's some fighting. You can sense that the facilities is kind of tired and people don't care. You can sense that people, they're not really caring about the organization or the future. They're caring about today and now and me. And you're like, where's the vision in this? Because this could be a great school. This could be a great business. I see the tool, the opportunity here. Or maybe you go into a restaurant, someone said, hey, go try the new place. And you go over and you try it, and you're like, man, actually the service wasn't great, and the place wasn't really clean, and the food was kind of so-so, and the attitudes of the staff said, man, it has so much potential, but it's visionless. Or maybe you've walked into a house, or maybe, unfortunately, it's your house sometime. You walk in, and you're like, where are we going? What are we doing? Where's the morale? It's down. Where's the hope of that we're trying to accomplish something? Or maybe it's even a person you know, or maybe at some point it's been you, and you look in the mirror and you kind of like, you just see visionless. You see someone who really isn't looking at hope, at a future. They're just kind of making it through each day. And you step back and say, God, what about vision? What about something that actually there's a conviction, there's a passion there, that I care? And I think it matters enough to us that we're going to spend 8 weeks looking at some of these people. You see their pictures up here. We're going on this life is good kind of feel. Anybody got any of those shirts or those mugs with life is good on it? Like I like those. I think they're not only cute and funny, I think some of them are profound. When you look at them and say, wait a second, there's a message in that coffee mug. There's a message in the back of that car that says something about life is good. So where we're going for 8 weeks is that, hey, life is good, but honestly, living with vision is better. Just making it is okay, but living with vision is better. And we're going to look at people in the Bible and at vision who have been resurrected. We're going to look at people who have a vision for their family, or a vision, honestly, for serving in a way that matters and isn't just kind of taking steps, but it's actually doing something with a team that matters. We're going to look at people who move, this phrase we call move toward the messes, that when you see something messy in someone's life or in a society, you don't turn from it, but you say, wait a second, God's inside of me, and I'm going to move toward that mess and be a part of a visionary who's going to help change that. And then we'll wrap up the series in 8 weeks with a guy named Isaiah, who he caught a vision of who God really is and what he looks like, and I want that because it can change us every day with that type of vision. Now, today's we're talking about resurrection. And resurrection, you might say, that's a churchy term. What's that mean? Let me help you understand resurrection first with some pictures. All right? So who watches some of those TV shows where they take the houses that are all beaten down, broken down, and they like upfit these houses, give them facelifts, change them up? I don't even know the names of them, Jada. I'm sorry, but I hear there's great shows about that. And then, so you take this picture of a house, and most people would look at it and say, man, that thing's terrible. Tear it down, burn it down, or just leave it. But a visionary looks at that house and says, wait a second, that house can be renovated or even resurrected, and it can have a purpose to it. Okay, how many dog lovers in here? Got dog lovers, we love dogs at our house. How many times have you either gone to the shelter or seen one around town that there's a dog that looks like he's just about dead, been abused, mistreated, and some people say, well, just put him down. You say, wait a second. Now, I want to be a part of truly a resurrection in the life of that pet. There's something inside of you, there's a conviction, and honestly, my wife Meg's got this to where we got animals coming out of our ears at our house, okay? But we'll keep taking them in. That's who we are. But you look at that dog and say, wait a second, there could be a vision to save that dog. Now, seriously, I know you guys, and I've seen you sometimes early in the morning before your first coffee. And when that happens, and you kind of look like that, and I say, okay, a resurrection needs to take place in that body, in that face. And so we get you your Starbucks, and you come to life. And we just saw a little miniature resurrection in there with you. So this term resurrection, it can be kind of scattered throughout our society, but Jesus wants it to be intensely personal. He wants it to be in your life. So this guy, Jesus, who we're talking about today, he is the first visionary we're going to look at. And there's part 1 today that literally says that, hey, life is good, but resurrection is better, takes us to our bottom line. This bottom line, that Jesus, he has a vision to defeat death once and every day. This visionary from years ago, this guy who came to earth and that some of us believe was the Son of God, is the Son of God, and when he came to earth, he had a vision that he literally would look at something kind of like a box of ashes that maybe we'd say, useless, you can't overcome it, it's dead, and he'd say, wait a second, I've got a vision to overcome death. One time, and literally every day in your life, I've got a vision for that. And that interests me. Because this guy, Jesus, as the ultimate visionary, has got something for you today. Let's talk about that. As in our last part of our time today, we'll sing a song. And I love this song, some of the words in it, where it talks about resurrection. And two phrases in particular that stood out to me that are profound. It said the tomb, which this will be our visual today, of like a tomb or a grave or something that's been burnt and killed and crushed and it's not worth anything. This tomb for this guy, Jesus, it was guarded in vain. Now you think about when somebody dies and you go to a funeral and you lay them to rest and you cover them in the ground and it's over. There is no need to guard a tomb because there's no more potential there. There's no more future. This is like this box. I mean, why would you guard this box? There's nothing of value in a box of ashes, but yet when we think about resurrection from this visionary, it says in the Bible that his tomb was guarded. Now it also said that this tomb, it was borrowed. It was borrowed for 3 days. And that is so strange because if you've ever been to a funeral, you know in your heartache and your grief and sometimes your celebration, that life, you walk away from there and you know it's not borrowed. I mean, that's a hole in the ground that's been filled and used for a purpose and covered, and you walk away. You might come back and visit it. You might celebrate with that person, but it's not borrowed. But in fact, in our last song today, you'll sing and you'll say, this tomb was borrowed for 3 days. Who does that? I believe a visionary who says, I'm going to defeat death. He's the one who borrows a tomb. That's amazing. Now, our source for this is the Bible. So if you come in today and say, hey, man, somebody just invited me, or I've been coming for weeks and I don't really believe the Bible. This is kind of encouraging stuff and good music, but I don't know about that Bible. Look, this is the source we're using, and here at Vision, we believe it's true. We believe it's accurate and reliable. And in fact, if you want to learn more about that specific piece, I encourage you to go back to our Starting Point series we did in the spring. And actually, our exact date of this was April 10th. It was the second week of Starting Point series, and I talked about the reliability of the Bible. And I took about a half an hour and unpacked that. So I would love for you to go on our website, go to the sermon page, and dig into that so you can at least get to a point where you say, okay, I hear what Pastor Matt's saying about the reliability of the Bible, and you make an educated decision about whether you believe that or not. But where I'm coming from today is that the Bible is true, and it's accurate, and we're going to dig into this life of Jesus. Because Jesus, his story is told mainly in the New Testament. There's some foretelling in the Old Testament, but the New Testament, there's 4 accounts. They're called Gospels. They're men that either knew him or saw him or talked to people who saw him, and they wrote 4 different accounts about this guy, Jesus. And they wrote down all this stuff about his life, about how even at this young age of 12, that he went to the temple. His parents took him there, and at that age, he knew enough about his vision that he was talking to people about God as his father. So Jesus, age 12, and he knew that for 30 years, he'd kind of be in training. But the last 3 years of his life, he would carry out this ministry. So I think back to when he was 12, and I wonder, when was the first time in his life that he realized that his life was going to be about a box of ashes? You know, was he 9? Was he 8? His dad was a carpenter. Was he sitting there? Was Jesus, as an 8-year-old playing with blocks and something or other? And it like dawned on him one day. He said, I am here to defeat death. Because at some point that happened. Sometime before 12, it dawned on him what his vision was. And I wonder how that felt as an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old or 10-year-old to realize that the visionary that you were was going to have to defeat death. Okay, not start a company, not raise a family, not defeat death. And he had to face that reality that at that moment, he got the what. The what was defeating death. Now, the how, he didn't know that yet. The how, I think even at age 12, I don't think he exactly knew it. He was talking about God the Father. He was talking about, he was going to teach people and lead people. But I wonder when that moment came that he realized the how. And now make sure you get this about vision. With vision in any area of your life, there's always a gap between the what and the how. You say, okay, the what, I want to lose weight. I don't know how yet. The what, we're going to get out of debt. I don't know how yet. The what, we're going to save our marriage. I don't know how yet. The what, I want my life to matter more. I don't know how yet. In that gap between the what and the how is when most visions die. That people come to you and say, man, you can't get out of debt, and your vision dies. They come to you and say, man, your marriage is too far gone. You can't possibly save it. And between the what and the how, it dies. Or you say, I want my life to matter. God, I sense it. You want my life to matter. And before he gives you the exact how, you realize actually you were just kind of imagining or dreaming. But no, vision locks in on the how and says, I'm going to hold in. I'm going to be disciplined until the how becomes clear, and I'm going to do this. And that's where Jesus at that young age got the what, and it wasn't until years later he got the how. And I want to figure out how he got there so I can pattern that and have vision in my life. So this is our visual today of these ashes that if you came up and stirred around these ashes and looked through them, I mean, there is nothing of value once something has died. It's gone. But Jesus said, I got a vision. And it's going to change that. It's going to change it. Now, Jesus' ministry, throughout his 3 years of ministry, these guys wrote down the stories in the Gospels, and they talked about different things he did, I believe, to foreshadow about this vision. He did a thing called baptism. A couple weeks ago, we baptized 16 people. And if you're out there, you saw people being lowered into water and raised out, just like they were thousands of years ago when Jesus first did it. And people probably said, man, that's cool. That's a neat visual of like new life or wet or water or something. After Jesus rose from the dead, I believe the first time people did baptism and they put somebody down there and said, wait a second, that's like Jesus going into the tomb. And when they raised the person out of the water, they said, that's like him being raised out from death. That's what he meant. That was in Luke 3. In Luke 16, Jesus told this story about a guy named Lazarus who was a beggar. That this guy died, and him and a rich man died at the same time, and Lazarus goes to the side of Abraham. And they're looking out. It's really weird, but he's like looking into hell, and this rich man's in hell, and Lazarus is like, what's going on with that rich man? The rich man is looking at him saying, this place is terrible. It's awful. Please go back and tell the people I love how bad it is in hell. And Lazarus is like, okay, Abraham, should I go back? I mean, I know I'm dead, but should I go back and tell him? And Jesus in his story says, some people won't even believe if somebody comes back from the dead to tell them. And I'm sure that day they heard the story, they're like, wow, that's really interesting. Until after Jesus was raised from the dead, they said, man, do you remember that story he told about Lazarus, the beggar, and that somebody would come back from the dead and people wouldn't believe him? They said, that's what he was talking about. And then in John chapter 2, Jesus was out teaching from the temple one day. People are listening, people are ridiculing him, all this stuff, and he says, hey, this temple is going to be crushed, and it's going to be raised again in 3 days. People are like looking behind him. They're like, what are you talking about? It took years to build that. And he just kind of let them think on that until he said, wait a second. What I'm talking about is my body. And they're like, what? And after he rose from the dead, I think people looked back and remembered that story and said, Jesus was right. That he was going to be broken on day 1 and gone on day 2. And day 3, he was raised from the dead. That's what he was talking about. So when you look throughout the Gospels, make sure you read. It's on your takeaway card. Read those passages. Put the pieces together so that when we put it together with the last part today, it fits. That Jesus, the visionary, all these people were in the what stage, and before he get to the how, a lot of people turned away. A lot of people gave up on it, but not us. We're digging into it. So while some people turned away and some people bought into it, one guy in our church, man, he has definitely bought into it. And I want to interview him. His name is Keith Mills. He's one of our elders. If you would, welcome Keith as he comes up here on the stage. And this guy, Keith, I love, man. He's like this combo of, Keith, come on up, man. Grab a seat. And he is a combo of Marine, elder, and he works with the babies. So I tell you got the whole package in that description of what you do and who you are. But Keith, for people who don't know you, man, give us a little picture of who is here at Vision with you and what you guys do.
Okay. First, I'm Keith Mills, and my wife Carmen, she's back in Viz Kids. I'm married, and we have 6 kids between the two of us. That's right, 6 kids and a grandchild. So we have a lot of kids here. And, we're blessed that Matt, when God gave Matt the vision to start Vision Church, he invited us to be part of that. And what a blessing for us. It has been a really good fit for us. We served back in Viz Kids and some other areas, and really it's been a heart that we were able to be here and serve with him.
Well, now Keith, he's got a story, like we all do. And in reality, there's a lot of dark parts of his story. He's going to give us some glimpses. But Keith, I want you as best you can to let us know what was life like before Christ, when you were dead rather than alive. You were darkness rather than light. What were you like? Tell us something about it.
It's kind of funny when Matt asked me to share this. I was talking with Carmen, and she says, you're not really going to tell them all the stuff that you did before you came to know Christ, are you? I said, no, babe, I'm not going to do that. I said, because my kids will be here in the front row taking notes and using that against me. So I said, no, so we're not going to do that. But there are a couple of things I do want to share because this is important. Things, I was 27 years old before I actually came to know the Lord. 27 years of living in the world, there's a lot of things that influence you. And a couple of things that really influenced me is some time that I spent in the Marine Corps, okay? What a great time, great service, a lot of good training, fed some things in our heart that really I had a passion to do back then. Now, the training that we had was not sitting around doing Bible studies. Unfortunately, this kind of training, we were out there trying to hurt people and training to hurt people. And really, to be honest with you, I didn't need Jesus back then. I mean, our drill instructors told us, we weren't allowed to die until they gave us permission. So I wasn't concerned about death. We didn't have to worry about that. So the things that we did were not glorifying Christ. And, it's and that lifestyle, really, that lifestyle produces a lot of pain and a lot of heartache that really you can't figure out how to fix.
Yeah. Even back then, what was your perception or perspective of people who followed Jesus?
We looked at them, really, I looked at them as they were weak. They had to trust in something that I couldn't see, I didn't feel. We had no respect for Christians. Not all the Marines did that, but the guys that I hung around did. We just didn't have any respect for that because really, they were using Jesus as a crutch in my mind instead of the power that he actually is. And they were experiencing things we couldn't experience. And so, we looked at that as a weakness in our division. So we persecuted them a lot.
Sure. Well, evidently something changed in your life 27 years ago. Yeah. So how would you explain, how you're different now that Jesus has resurrected you?
Well, when you talk about resurrection, for me, that's an ongoing process. That's not something that happened. That's a process that began and continues because every day, I'm still in the ashes and we're still digging out from just really from life. Life happens before you know Christ. Life happens after you know Christ. And there's a lot of things that really affect your walk. And kind of the way I wanted to explain this is walk with me for just a second, okay? Yeah. All right, when I tell you to, I want you to take a deep breath, okay, and exhale all the air out of your lungs. And when you do that, I want you to hold it just a second, okay? Take a deep breath. Exhale. Now hold it there. Don't breathe in, okay? Hold it there as long as you can, okay? And as you start to do that, you'll feel pressure in your chest, the desire to want to take a deep breath, and there's no air coming in. So you feel that it's a crushing pressure. See, that's what life does to you, okay?
Can I breathe now?
Now you can breathe. Yeah, okay. Now you can go and breathe. Okay. that pressure that you feel, that's the pressure of a nasty divorce. That's the pressure of the loss of a loved one. That's the pressure of a bad report from the doctor. Yeah. That's a pressure of a prodigal son, right. Prodigal daughter. Right. That's the kind of stuff. But what you have is life. And see, God's word is life. And as you study that and you start breathing that, God says, just breathe. And sometimes it doesn't take away the problem, but it allows you to breathe again. And so for me, that's resurrection. That's able to breathe again, knowing that, hey, he's going to be right here with us as we walk through this and continue to walk through it. Yes. And it's amazing what God can do. Now we see God's power in what it really is.
Right.
And continue to see that every day. I
love that I've seen in Keith's life, certainly, that he was resurrected 27 years ago, but that resurrecting is an ongoing process. And about 2 weeks ago, he even gave me a call, said, Matt, I got a vision for something. And I love it when something gets a hold of Keith's heart because he goes after it. And now Keith, if you don't know him, he is not real big on either talking on stage or talking on camera. So when he told me his vision, I said, well, Keith, if we're going to do this, we got to at least get on camera. And so we did. And I don't know if you hadn't seen the video yet this week about the Bucket Project, but almost 5,000 people now have heard about what God started in him. So tell us about the Bucket Project.
Okay. The Bucket Project really is came to my heart from a church down in Louisiana. A month or so ago, you heard about the floods that devastated those guys down there. I mean, they're living in shelters. They're living in tents. They're living in hotels. They're basically they don't have a place to go home. And God laid it on my heart. How can we help these people? I mean, these people need some help. I know if it were us, we would want some help, and I know that they need help as well. Yeah. So God laid it on my heart to reach out. So made a couple phone calls, come to find out there's something called a bucket project, okay? And I said it was a flood bucket. This guy from a church down in Louisiana said, this is what we'd like for you to do. I said, well, tell me what is that? I don't even know what that is. Tell me what a flood bucket is. And it's a bucket that has things basically for cleaning. We're not rebuilding houses. We're going to put together cleaning materials. We're going to put together masks and gloves and box cutters and disinfectants and trash bags. So people, as the water started receding in the last couple of weeks, they're going to get a chance to get back into their house. Now, we're not going to go rebuild houses, but these people, at least they'll be able to go back in their home, and there's a little bit of hope involved with that. So now they'll see, hey, we got a chance to get back and clean this place up, and maybe even get out of the hotel, get back into these things.
Right. So, and it takes about $30.
It's about $30. What we've done is we've come up with a list of items that we think that really, and really it came from down there. These are the things that they really need and can use, and it makes it easy for us to put it in a bucket, pack it in there tight. Weighs about 17 pounds, and God laid it on my heart that we're going to raise 1,000 buckets. Now,
1,000.
That's a lot of stinking buckets. I don't know how we're going to do it. I don't know how we're going to, really, I don't know how we're going to get it down there, all the logistics of that, but I know God's working behind the scenes, and we're really on a good start with this thing.
But it's so cool. Think about that. God gave him the what, okay, buckets. He hasn't given him all of the how yet. But it's come together with different partnerships, with Lowe's and Home Depot, with other people in town, with transport. And how many have we got committed to already?
Almost 300 buckets in less than a week.
Right. So it's happening.
Yeah, it's going to happen. And God's going to, He's going to be the glory. Yeah. And what I'm asking our church to do, and even the community to do, is not just help us with that, with the bucket, but pray for the people down there. These guys are still displaced, and they don't have hope right now. Right. They may or may not even know who Christ is. And imagine going through that, not having a Savior, not having a rock. This bucket can be a seed that we're going to plant down there to really give these people hope. Maybe they'll see the glimpse of Christ in us because we packed a bucket full of cleaning stuff, and we shipped it down there, and we brought it to their doorstep. And maybe I don't know if that's going to work or not, but I believe that it will. I really believe that it will.
I believe it will too. All right, well, let's thank Keith for coming up and sharing, for being a visionary. Thank you, my friend. And you can be a part of that. You can go to our website. There's a drop down on there on our outreach page. You can buy the buckets, you can give money, and then they go buy the buckets, whatever you want to do, be a part of that. And the goal is around the first, second week of October to haul 1,000 buckets down there and bless people with that. So that's pretty cool. Now back to Jesus, our visionary, and his story, which I encourage you again to read some of the verses on the takeaway card. Read them this week as part of his story that's told in Luke 22 and 23. We'll walk you through the trial and the death and the burial of a visionary. It'll walk you up to that point to where it looked like all hope was gone for that visionary. And the people following him said, okay, we got the what, but man, what about the how? I mean, the how's kind of just going away. There's not going to be a how. And this week, as I prepared for this, I found an article that was written about the physiology of what Jesus went through his last 12, 24 hours. And I found this article, and I turned my phone off, and I shut the door, and I took about 10 minutes to let it really sink in as I read this, and it talked about what his body went through and what suffering he went through and where they really put nails and what really happens when fluid accumulates in your body cavity. And I let that weigh on me so heavily so that I could understand more how his followers felt on that Friday afternoon when he died, and they took him to put him in a tomb. And they literally felt like we would if I gave you a box of ashes and said, what good is this for? You say, man, it's not good for anything. And in fact, the way you would feel, like the way they felt when your vision appears to just die and you feel lifeless. And maybe you feel confused. Like, God, wait a second. You said if I did this, you'd fix our family, our marriage, our finances, my health, and your vision looks like it's dying and you're confused or you're angry or maybe even you're paralyzed to where those guys would sit down and say, how do we go on? The visionary is dead. The vision is dead. The what, I guess this what of defeating death was just a dream or just an imagination. It wasn't a real vision because there's no how. And we think about how they felt and that a part of them had died. Well, you come to Sunday morning because, day one, he died. And day two, they're just like paralyzed trying to figure out how life goes on. And I want you to get that in your life, when you think about vision in any area of your life, there's going to be times between the what and the how when you feel paralyzed like you can't possibly go on. And they got up on Sunday morning, and that's where our story kind of picks back up. Because Sunday morning, you'll see in Mark 16, says when the Sabbath, which was Saturday, was over, a couple of these ladies got up. These ladies who were paralyzed, who were lifeless, who were angry and confused. They got up, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome. They bought spices so they might go to anoint his body. They were going to go to this grave and try to bring some type of honor to him. They were going to go into it and try to care for his body, for this visionary, and they start heading toward the tomb. Now, this story is in all four of the Gospels. I love this one because I feel like it gives a lot of logical perspective to it that says very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they're on their way to the tomb, and then they ask each other, so wait a second, what about the stone? Don't you remember they put this big stone? This stone is as big as maybe four of these panels up here. Humongous stone had been rolled in front of this tomb, sealed with the authority of the Roman government, and now soldiers stood in front of it. So these ladies are walking up to it and saying, okay, we want to even honor Jesus, but how are we going to even move the stone? How are we going to get past any government officials? And they, again, are kind of confused and paralyzed in what they're doing. So it picks up verse 4, it says, but when they looked up, they saw that this huge stone had been rolled away. That doesn't make sense. You don't do that in a tomb. You close it up. Maybe you come and minister a little bit, some spices, but you close it, you seal it. It says in verse 5, as they entered the tomb, they saw a young guy dressed in a white robe, sitting on the right side. They were alarmed. Now, this wasn't like the gardener. This wasn't like a little servant boy. Get this. This is an angel who had come from heaven. Now, if you're here a couple weeks ago and I talked about Jesus being the Lord of hosts, that means he is the Lord or the leader of the armies of angels in heaven. So this guy sitting here is not playing a harp. He doesn't have big wings and he floated in there. This is a warrior who was sent from an army in heaven to come down and move a stone and to toss away the officials, toss away the officers, to break the seal and to open this up. And he's sitting there. And these ladies walk in and like, and it's so interesting with Scripture because they did exactly what the angel said not to do. The last part of the verse says they were alarmed. Wouldn't you be alarmed if a angel, truly a warrior from God, was sitting there and the power and energy of him was emanating out of that tomb? It says they were alarmed, and he says, don't be alarmed. I say, okay. He said, you're looking for Jesus, the Nazarene, the guy from Nazareth, who was crucified. He says, truly, in your world, in your eyes, he has been crushed, burnt, defeated, discarded. You're coming to look for him, the guy who was crucified? But in verse 6, the three words he says, it changes everything. It takes you from the what to the how when the angel says he is risen. He says, this guy who you thought was dead, gone, useless, buried, he has defeated death. The how of the vision has happened. He's not here. See the place where they laid him? And they look over, because they've been so distracted by this brightness and light and energy and power. They look to the side where Jesus' body had been, and all that's left are rags. There's no body there anymore. Angel says, but go. Tell his disciples, and Peter, who's kind of now is like the leader, leading these band of followers, says, Jesus, is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you'll see him just as he told you. So these ladies, they leave the tomb area. And this is accurate. It said, trembling and bewildered. Wouldn't you be trembling? I mean, wouldn't you be like bewildered, like, what just happened? I mean, is this really true? Do we see it? Was it a vision? Is this a dream? Is this reality? They leave that place in shock, literally, about what they've just experienced. It says the women went out and fled from the tomb. They didn't say anything to anyone because they were afraid. And I think a lot of times in our vision we're pursuing, we're going to think, is it coming together? Is it really going to happen? Is this possible? And others will say, no way. That's not what's happening. And you're almost kind of like trembling and bewildered. Can this possibly happen? And again, in this from what to how, the visions die, but they're walking out there saying, is this real? Did this really happen? Verse 9 says, when Jesus rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to this lady Mary Magdalene, a lady that Jesus had done great things in her life. He appears to her, out of whom he'd driven 7 demons. She went to go tell the guys. She said, hey, he's risen. Says she told those who'd been with him and who were mourning and weeping, because that's how we'd be. If our visionary had been crushed, if you came in here on a Sunday and Matt, your local visionary, had been crushed, you'd be mourning and weeping, saying, how can this be happening? Our family here at Vision, our vision we have, our plan is being crushed. They were mourning and weeping. So when they heard that Jesus was alive and that she'd seen him, they didn't even believe it. They didn't believe it. It says afterward, Jesus appeared in a different form to 2 of them while they're walking in the country. And these guys, they returned and reported to the rest, but they didn't believe them either. Now these guys, I love this story so much. We took our Easter services here and built it around it. So if you weren't here in Easter or you missed it, you can go to our website, check out the Walking Dead series, and click on Easter, and you will hear about it, even see that up here we had some guys who acted this out. 2 men that were walking down the road, and Jesus came up with them, and finally they realized this is the risen Savior, the visionary who completed his vision. And in verse 14, the last verse, says, later, Jesus appeared to the 11, the rest of the disciples, as they were eating. He rebuked them for their lack of faith and their stubborn refusal to believe those who'd seen him after he'd risen. Now, this is interesting. Being rebuked by a visionary, it actually could have happened in our lifetime. Because, take a look at this picture. Does anybody know who this computer geek is up on the screen? Who 30 years ago, he said, I think there could be a computer in every office and in every house. And I think a lot of people said to that visionary, man, you are crazy. There is no way. That is so outlandish. And I think if he stood up here today and said, really? Was it that outlandish? That wasn't a dream or imagination. That was a vision that we would put a computer in every person's pocket. He didn't even know that, did he? We'd have them in our pockets, on our desks, everywhere. We have computers. And Jesus, as a visionary, came back and said, how could you not believe me? I said this would happen. I said that out of ashes, there still would be hope. So indeed, Jesus, he visually for us said, look, this box of meaninglessness, that you can actually find something here of value. And he says to you, when you see or think of a cross, of me forevermore, realize that I'm a visionary who made it from the what to the how. The how, I would go on that cross and die a vicious death for you and be raised from it so that you could be resurrected, so that Keith Mills could be resurrected, so that Keith Mills could be resurrecting every day. That literally when Keith is on his journey and life beats him down, saying, okay, God, I know I still have my salvation, but this life, this is too tough. He says, no, I'm resurrecting you still. I'm still doing that in you. He looks at me and says, Matt, I resurrected you. I'm resurrecting you. And Jesus says, out of this uselessness, this ashes that have no life to them, out of this tomb that was borrowed, is hope. And this visionary would dust his hands off and say, will you follow me in that vision? And I say, we will here at Vision Church.